JT and PG-13. Let's continue with our versus series with those two players, because as I keep making my versus series, what better way to continue than with guys like this? Two all-star caliber players who had some all-time moments this past postseason and are top 5 players at their respective positions. But before I get started, I would like to give a shout out to all of my subscribers because I recently hit 60,000 subs. Man, it has been a real journey on YouTube, and I thank each and every single one of y'all that I have been blessed to be able to come on this platform and build a legitimate following for myself. To all the day ones that have watched from the Macklemore intro days, I appreciate each and every single one of y'all for real. Because as I say all the time, I am nothing without you guys. And with the support of you guys, I will continue to keep making great videos on this channel as I strive to reach 100K by the end of the year. And to everybody that is new to this channel, welcome. This is your boy Young Mustard. Hit that subscribe button and push the bell for post notifications. And without further ado, let's get back to the topic at hand and talk about our first player in this versus video, and that is Jayson Tatum.
Milk the clock. That's exactly what they did. Now you give it to your option 1A with a good ball handle and ability to create his own stuff, and that's exactly what Jayson Tatum was able to do here. Strong left, and usually when guys that are right-handed go left, they're going to pull up, not all the way, and he did exactly that.
Now JT definitely holds a special place in my heart despite playing on two of my most hated teams in all of sports, the Boston Celtics and the Duke Blue Devils. Man, I cannot stand either of those teams as a Bulls and a Kentucky Wildcats fan. But nonetheless, despite the teams he's played for, Jayson Tatum is one of the best players, not just young players, but players in the league. This is a guy that when he came into the NBA, many people thought he would be a quality starter, but nobody thought he would be this good, especially this soon in his NBA career, as Tatum over the last 2 seasons has been an all-star caliber player who has even made an all-NBA team, and just this past season had the best year of his career, no shocker, as he achieved a career high in points per game with 26 a night, along with 7 rebounds and 4 assists, shooting 46% from the field, 39% from behind the arc, on nearly 8 attempts a game, which is a career high by the way, and on another career high in free throw attempts, he also shot 87% at the charity strike. And he didn't just stop in the regular season with his productivity, because he translated that to the playoffs as he averaged 30 against the Brooklyn Nets with Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, and without his guy and Jaylen Brown, they were able to still steal a game in Game 3, or should I say, it was really Jayson Tatum who stole that game, as he had a 50-piece along with 7 assists, 6 rebounds and 2 steals and a block, shooting 53% from the field, knocking down 5 of his 11 3-pointers and shooting 87% at the free throw line. I mean, when you talk about a guy who is on fire, Jayson Tatum fits that bill perfectly for what he did in that Game 3. Whether it was the mid-range game, getting to the free throw line, he had 15 attempts I would add, or just knocking down threes, or even just playing great defense, because he did that as well. Jayson Tatum was doing it all, backpacking the Boston Celtics. Offensively, Tatum has really taken steps towards becoming one of the best scorers in the NBA. As a 3-point shooter, he's one of the best in the league on a very high volume, and it's not like it's catch and shoot situations. The guy can actually create his own shot off of the dribble, as he has his signature move, the sidestep 3. And from the mid-range game, don't get it twisted, he can kill you from behind the arc, but inside the arc, he can still be just as, if not even more deadly. And aside from his offensive productivity, on the defensive end, he's also giving you max effort, as even though he may not be an all-NBA defender, he is still one of the best defenders at his position, and due to his size and length, you could argue that he's the most important defender on that team because of his versatility. Because with the size that he has on him, he can guard some 4s, and because of his lateral quickness and speed, he can defend point guards and shooting guards on the perimeter as well. Tatum is easily one of the best defenders at his position, and combined with his offensive ability, it makes him one of the best two-way players in the league. But now that we have addressed his strengths, let's now touch on his weaknesses, as there are a couple of them that I want to harp on. As a playmaker, there are definitely a couple of players at his position I would take over him, as sometimes when he gets into his bag, he can miss open passing lanes to guys on his team, and I definitely think that's something that he needs to work on. And even as a scorer, he just isn't as good enough of a scorer to validate things like that. And that's not to say that he's not a great scorer. Like, he's a great one, don't get me wrong, but he's not an elite scorer. There's a difference between a guy like Jayson Tatum versus a Kevin Durant or a Steph Curry or a Kyrie Irving or a Damian Lillard. Those are the elite of the elite. I think Tatum is in that second tier, and the reason for that is also because of this, which is another weakness in his game: the lack of aggression at attacking the basket. Though he does get to the basket at times, I will give him that, but I still feel like he doesn't get there enough, as he settles far too often for the mid-range jumper. Like, he's a good mid-range shooter, one of the best in the league, but you're not Kevin Durant, you're not Kawhi Leonard, you're not Kobe Bryant. You're a good mid-range shooter, but sometimes it's best to attack the basket, and if you attack the basket, you can collapse the defense, which can lead to driving kick situations to guys on the perimeter that are open, or you could just draw a foul. And when I watch him, Tatum just doesn't do that. But nonetheless, he is still a great young player with a lot of time to improve on those weaknesses, and if he decides to do those things, I could see Tatum becoming an MVP in this league sooner rather than later. Because let's not forget that this guy is going to be 22 years old, entering his 5th season in the league next year. He has plenty of time to grow and get better, and with the resume that he already has, with all the years left on his career, that we expect him to perform at this level, if not even better. Not only do I expect him to be the best player in the league for years to come, but I also expect him to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. But now that we have talked about JT as a player, his strengths and weaknesses, let's then use that to transition to his opponent in this versus, and that is PG-13, Paul George himself.
So you're talking about rookie initiation? Well, this is the rookie initiation of Paul George on Isaiah Stewart. My goodness, it's not personal, brother. It's all business.
You know, as an NBA YouTuber myself, it's very easy for me to spot out biases against certain players, and I can see so many biases against a guy like Paul George. As whenever Paul George plays bad, i.e. the 2020 NBA bubble, the criticism and hatred towards this man is at an all-time high. I mean, I have never heard the creation of so many nicknames just off of one playoff series for one player. I mean, Pandemic P, Playoff P, Way Off P, Poverty P, PG-13%, George Paul, PG-13 misses, PG-13 reasons why, COVID-13. I'm sorry, but this is just actually too funny. Let me be serious, for real. But as it pertains to whenever Paul George does good, my views, I always notice it's a 10 out of 10. It is not a 1 out of 10 the way it is whenever it's a Paul George criticizing video. Honestly, my views just prove that. NBA fans love to slander Paul George, but they are never there to give this man his credit, because Paul George as a player, I believe he played some of the best basketball of his entire career this past season, and nobody was there to give him props. I gave him props. I even made a video and said PG deserves your respect, and obviously that video didn't do that well, but nonetheless, my point still stands. Paul George is an outstanding player who this past season even changed up his game to be an even more effective player. As defensively, he may not have been what he used to be, but he was still a borderline elite defender, so that covers one side of the ball. But on the offensive side, that's really where I saw growth in his game. As a scorer, he may not have been MVP PG, but the efficiency levels were through the roof at 47% from the field, 41% from behind the arc on nearly 8 attempts per game, and also 87% at the free throw line, which translates to a true shooting percentage of nearly 60%. But the scoring, as great as it was, and the defense, as great as that was also, is still not the growth in his game. The growth in his game that I saw this past year was as a playmaker, with a career high and over 5 assists a game. And when you watch the film, Paul George was doing things on the ball that I have not seen him do throughout his entire career, as whether it's in the half court, in transition, the pick and roll, out of the double teams. No matter what the circumstances were against opposing defenses, PG was consistently able to use the attention that he received as an offensive threat to be able to set up guys on his team on the offensive side of the ball, which led to the Clippers having one of the best offenses in the league. And I always knew PG was a good passer, but I didn't think he was this good of a passer and playmaker, because in my opinion, I think he's one of the best playmakers in basketball. Like, honestly, the assist numbers may not show it, but considering that he's sharing the rock with a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who also playmakes, Reggie Jackson, who also playmakes, it really goes without saying, considering how much of an offensive threat he is, it's not shocking that he can get so many open shots for his teammates, especially compared to other players in the NBA who aren't nearly the threats that he is, which limits what they can do in the half court as compared to a guy like Paul George. And the biggest knock about PG is showing up in the postseason, but this year, he lived up to all the expectations, and one could argue he even superseded them, considering that a lot of people probably expected him to fail and fall flat on his face again. But despite all of those expectations, he came in the postseason and averaged 27 points along with nearly 10 rebounds a game, as well as averaging 5 assists and a steal, shooting 44% from the field, just short of 34% from behind the arc, and 84% at the free throw line. And though he did have his moments of inconsistency, especially against the Dallas Mavericks, considering what he did against the Utah Jazz with an all-time great Game 5 performance and leading them over them in Game 6 as well, it was very impressive to say the least. And also, even him taking the Suns 6 games, that was on the same level, if not even superseding what he did in that Utah Jazz series without Kawhi as well. PG really shut the haters up, and that quote of him saying he's on people's ass this year, he more than lived up to it, because when the Clippers needed him to be the superstar that we all know he can be, he more than lived up to those expectations. But now that we have addressed the good, let's now talk about the bad and the ugly with Paul George. And for one, he's inconsistent, and that is a big issue with Paul George. If you go to a lot of his seasons in the past, going back to Oklahoma City and even the days in Indiana, up until now with the Los Angeles Clippers, Paul George has been the definition of inconsistency. There have been so many stretches where he'll be white hot, and then he'll have stretches where he'll be ice cold. And even this past postseason, especially against the Dallas Mavericks, Kawhi was backpacking him, as Paul George would have some really rough shooting nights. Like, honestly, it was tough to watch. And obviously, you know, social media had to clown him for it. But another thing about Paul George that a lot of people just kind of sweep under the rug is his health. Because over the last 2 seasons, PG has not played 60 games. Yes, 60 games. And mind you, the past 2 seasons have been shortened seasons. And no matter how good of a player you are, the best ability is availability, and Paul George is not always available. And if he is, a lot of times more than not, he is compromised in some way, shape, or form, like the shoulder injury that he had in the 2019 NBA playoffs against the Portland Trail Blazers in OKC. But despite all the weaknesses, similar to Jayson Tatum, he's still one of the best two-way players in all of basketball, and I would even go as far to say that Paul George could retire right now, and I would have no issue with him going into the Hall of Fame, even if it's the first ballot. But that then brings us to who is better between PG-13 and JT himself. And honestly, this was a tough one, because similar to the Harden and Luka video that I made, these guys are very close. I mean, they are really overlapping each other in the all-time rankings. But as far as who I have to go with on who is the better player, I'm gonna give the edge to Jayson Tatum. And honestly, it just comes down to 2 things: consistency and health. For starters, Paul George, he's a very inconsistent player. Jayson Tatum, he can have moments of inconsistency, but it's just moments, and it doesn't happen in the playoffs as often as a guy like Paul George, who not only has moments, but just straight up stretches of just god awful shooting. I have to say, terrible shooting for real. And then combine that with the fact that he's fairly injury prone, as opposed to a guy like Jayson Tatum, who has been essentially an Iron Man since he has entered the NBA. That's something that I have to take under consideration. So as far as I'm concerned, JT, I give you the edge. You are the better player versus Paul George. But I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me, so let me know down below in the comment section, and I will interact with as many people as possible, because trust me, I do read those comments. If you're not subscribed, press that subscribe button and push that bell for post notifications. I don't know why it took you this long to do so, bruh. Join the family for real. And also follow me on social media. The links are down below in the description box. This is your boy Young Mustard signing out. Y'all have a blessed day. Peace.